Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris and this is the Tournament Temple City. It is the largest LEGO Ninjago set released for the summer wave this year and proposes kind of a reimagining of the type of set that we got back in 2015, like the Temple of Erjitsu. Unlike the Ninjago City sets, this one is not really meant to be a modular building in a city, but instead proposes this massive temple-like structure with a very nice nature surrounding it, as well as a bridge, two different separate buildings. There's a lot of details to take a look at in this set. And I'm really excited because not only is this a gorgeous set, but it also combines with one of the other sets in the wave, which is the Tournament Battle Arena here. Really cool how LEGO actually makes certain sets compatible with each other. But as of right now, we are going to be focusing on an individual review of the Tournament Temple City. And yes, this does feature the return of Mr. Pale, aka the Elemental Master of Light, who originally appeared in LEGO Ultra Agents in 2015, so things are really coming full circle, and I can't wait to dive into all the details of this absolutely gargantuan, beautiful Ninjago temple right now. So let's go. So this is set number 71814, the Tournament Temple City. It retails for $250 and will release on June 1st, 2024 everywhere in the world, one of the only Ninjago sets releasing on June 1st in the US. It comes with 3,489 pieces, a ton of minifigures including several exclusive ones, and one of the most detailed Ninjago location-based temples we've gotten since the original Temple of Erjitsu. In fact, speaking of, in many ways this feels like a spiritual successor to that original temple, going from 2015 to 2024, showcasing just how much LEGO has changed in terms of their building techniques, in terms of the detail they can do with rockwork and natural environments, as well as buildings and integrating unique functions into every single one of the buildings themselves. The Tournament Temple City is one of the best Ninjago sets we've gotten in a long time, and the quality of the build here really feels like some of the stuff that we would get for themes like LEGO Monkey Kid, or even some of the LEGO movie themes where they would go absolutely all out on the playsets, and because of that, this is one of the most exciting Ninjago sets in a long time. The even cooler thing is that you can use this to combine with the smaller Tournament Battle Arena, allowing you to expand a scene, and also if you buy both sets, you will get a copy of pretty much every single exclusive minifigure from this wave, which is an added bonus. So I'll actually start off by taking a brief look at the minifigures themselves. I already covered the minifigures in much greater detail on my individual minifigure video, so you can check that out if you want. Starting off, we do have a really nice micro figure of Kai's core suit, continuing along with the Cole and J ones we got last year in Ninjago City markets. We also get the return of Mr. Pale, the Elemental Master of Light from 2015's Ultra Agents, as well as a brand new metallic gold temple guard casted fully in pearl gold, utilizing a dark orange recolor of a breathing suit. It's a really cool minifigure, and I can't wait to see those in action in the show. We get tournament versions of Zane, Wildfire, Nia, Cole, Aaron, and Lloyd, as well as, of course, the main villain of Ninjago Dragons Rising, Lord Raz and Jordana, rounding out the selection of minifigures, which is a really good lineup. We also get a number of civilians and characters that are related to the tournament, from Roby, Bleck, as well as a Blacksmith, to really just complete the lineup of all the different characters. Roby and Bleck in particular seem to have been integrated with specialized torso and, for Bleck's case, head prints for the set, meaning that these characters may be a little bit more important than they may seem. The set does come with a couple of really cool accessories as well, including this special exclusive printed 2x2 tile piece adorning this special tournament cup. We have yet to see exactly how this is going to take play in the show, what exactly is the purpose of this particular artifact, but it's pretty cool because it really does harken back to the older Chen's staff of elements that we got all the way back in 2015, kind of a similar tournament vibe. And what was a very nice surprise to be sure, but a welcome one, is that we got a recolored climber armor piece in the most realistic colors we have ever gotten for the piece yet. It's casted in gunmetal gray and reddish brown and is a really great piece to be used for army building, for samurai, or all sorts of different styles of armor. I really love that they included it in this set. Clearly they had a bit of extra budget and just decided to give us this really nice piece, which was a total surprise because this isn't even really showcased on the box art, and you don't really even get a good look at it when you're taking a look at the entire set itself. It's just kind of a random small thing they included for minifigure fans, and I certainly will be picking this up when I grab it on Pick-a-Brick eventually when it appears a few months down the line. Now, speaking of the armor piece, I figured that moving onwards to transition to the main build, we may as well start for this first side building here, kind of on the right side. This is the Blacksmith shop. There are a couple of different play features integrated into this section of the build. The main one being a sliding door, which you can push aside to reveal a hidden entrance into the caves. I will say though, it's a little tricky to slide the door back. You really have to stick your finger in there, and then the lever can sometimes get stuck, but that's how it works. It's just a very simple mechanism to open and close this secret passageway, which I think is a nice inclusion. Otherwise, if you lift up the roof of the blacksmith shop, there is a very simple bed on the inside with some little nice Easter eggs hidden inside of this room as well, including a sticker with the trading card for JZX. Always good to get another of those trading card stickers ever since we started getting them in the Temple of Urjitsu, again, harkening back to the fact that this is supposed to be kind of a reference to that particular set, as well as that micro figure Kai that we mentioned earlier on, which is always very cool to get a little action figure version of the ninja themselves. Aside from a small candle here and the Harry Potter wand box, which is used to hold the card, there isn't really much else included in this particular section, so we can take a look at the interior of the blacksmith shop. Somewhat surprisingly, the upper floor does not remove, meaning that it is a little harder to access the interior. I actually had to completely remove some of the pieces to be able to access the armor piece, which has a stand right there, but there's all sorts of blacksmith equipment, from a sharpening stone to an anvil, which is triggered with a hammer striking the anvil based on the movement of a water wheel. While the space is admittedly pretty constrained and there isn't really a lot of leeway to get figures in there or to pose different minifigures doing the blacksmith's tasks, I think they did the best they could with the pieces included, and I really love the amount of scenery surrounding the shop itself. From the trickling waterfall using the power blast elements, curving around the side of the building and flowing downwards to trigger the water wheel, all of it is done really nicely. And this clearly represents a major upgrade in terms of depicting a traditional kind of rustic style of building like this, especially when compared to other LEGO products. To prevent the mechanism from locking up and essentially forcing the hammer downwards the wrong way, there are a couple of wooden platform pieces built on the top of the water wheel. Typically, a function like this would have been handled internally, but these actually serve a dual function where if you place minifigures on top of the platforms, they can actually do battle atop the water wheel. Of course, spinning it does actuate the hammer, which is a pretty tried and true function when it comes to LEGO builds, but there is one thing I do want to point out, and that is that I feel that this particular building and certain small aspects of this set probably could have used just a little bit more time in the development process and a few more iterations, and let me explain why. Due to the way that this feature is set up, it is actually really easy to allow the mechanism to just rip the pieces apart. Really, the only thing that's holding in some of the gears here are single 1x1 bricks, meaning that if you turn it the way it's supposed to, the gears can be forced outwards, where you can see the gear is actually being pushed out of the axle, and even worse, if you use the gear crank on the back of the building, this one, and spin it up fairly frequently, you can see it is really easy to get the teeth misaligned and start to wobble it back and forth. It's because of this very compact function being utilized and hinged on only just one single 1x1 brick pieces that make it super easy for this to just break after a few rotations, especially if you're not careful with it. You can see that the entire thing is ripping itself apart, and so that's just something I do want to point out as an improvement factor where I feel they could have made this a lot tighter. That being said, these compromises were made in order to have the catching function be a battle feature of its own, which is somewhat reminiscent of the smaller set of the Wave, the Tournament Battle Arena, allowing you to place two different minifigures on top of the battling function and allow them to actually do battle with each other. Here you can see Aaron versus Jordana going on, and while you do need to do this quite a few different times to actually make the function work, and you can see the gear is actually skipping here and there, the overall intent is for one of the figures to be knocked offwards, and maybe it'll be a bit easier if we do it with some of the more bulkier characters here, but overall I think it is a fun feature, just something that I definitely feel could have used a few more tries in the iteration development for this feature, because it does tend to either pull the building out of the precarious platform it's mounted on, the building is made to be removed, so it does tend to fall off, or just actually rip the entire column apart, which you can see is going on right here, because also the entire thing is mounted on just a single 1x8 or 1x10 plate. Overall, moving on from that though, one of the other nice features included in the set is this little miniature blimp, and this is something that is very reminiscent to me of Ninjago Skybound. Wu and Misako were seen in this blimp in the intro to Skybound, and it is a really nice upgrade for a mini blimp that we would see in some of those older Ninjago sets. It has a very simple build, just utilizing a bucket and a couple of the newer style of rounded pieces, but I think it does the job nicely. It's a very cute and small thing, and a nice little side build to add on to the set. One of the more substantial side builds, though, is this particular dragon, and I don't really know what the deal is with this one, how it's relevant to the story, but this looks to be almost like an autumn-themed dragon, or maybe a leaf or nature theme, where you can see there are actual leaves growing as the eyelashes on the side of the dragon. It has all these flower details scattered throughout it, and I will say it is a really interesting color scheme, especially compared to a lot of the other dragons we've gotten in the past. We've never gotten a dark orange, flame yellowish orange, brown, and orange dragon, and I just think it is a really, really lovely color scheme. It just works out so well. It definitely feels like a nature dragon, and I'm really curious to see what this one will look like in the show. The only lackluster thing to me are the way the wings are built, utilizing just the blade elements. I'm never really a big fan of it when LEGO does that for dragons. I always prefer something that feels a little bit more built out and less skeletal, but I do understand they were working with pretty limited parts budget and pieces for this particular dragon, and despite it being so small, you can actually get it into a lot of good poses because those wings actually double as the arms, which means that you can just move this around. It feels very realistic crouched down, and I actually like it a lot better when it's on the ground versus flying in the air because it just feels a lot more dynamic, like there's a lot of personality behind this dragon. It is actually reusing a recolor of the Baby Ryu or Teen Ryu dragon headpiece in dark orange, which I previously lamented the fact that it doesn't really have a lower jaw, so it feels very hollow, but for a dragon like this, which probably isn't going to have as much screen time as Ryu and is maybe a little less important, I think it works out totally fine, and you can even fit it inside the cave of the set as an added bonus, which I think is a very nice touch. It's really cool to have it be crawling out and emerging from the cave as if it is being discovered underneath the temple for the first time. It's a really nice feature, and it reminds me of the side build dragon that we got for the Dragon Pit, which also could run through the gate. Moving on from the dragon though, I think it's time that we focus our attention on the main temple, kind of going from the right to the middle section, and then we'll move to the left of the building and take a look at some of the other parts of the building from there. So let's take a look at that. The temple itself is utilizing a color scheme we haven't really seen from Ninjago yet, with a gorgeous dark blue, bright red, tan, and white, which is actually a really interesting color scheme that maybe on paper doesn't sound that good, but in practice is absolutely stunning. I really love the usage of the recolored Dragon's Rising Strike gimmick headpiece in pearl gold at the top of the temple there, which is a really interesting kind of ornamental display to use, but totally makes sense for this Dragon's Rising theme. The interior of the temple features a lot of really nice, interesting accessories, like a rotary phone, portraits of two masters that we don't really know who they're referring to yet, but I'm sure that's going to be somewhat relevant in the show itself, a little bit of a flower, and even more detail as we go on to some of the lower levels. Well, of course, on the bottom here, you can see one of the most interesting artifacts, that tournament staff there, which, again, we don't know what the role is in the story, but I'm curious to see what they do with it. We have another level used with a little bit of a training area and two beds for your characters to sleep in. Always good to get a training area and a working punching bag in a temple itself, but I will say the temple is pretty limited in terms of the amount of space provided. It basically has the exact same footprint as 2015's Temple of Virjitsu, right down to utilizing the same exact wedge panel pieces for the floors, and while I think it is really nice we did actually get a good amount of interior detail, I also do wish that maybe a little bit more space was dedicated to potentially finishing the temple up, making it one large building that actually is fully enclosed, because unfortunately it just is pretty much half a pagoda as is, which is somewhat to be expected given the amount of stuff that the rest of the set has going on. All this to say that while the temple is nice, it actually is kind of the least interesting thing to me about the Tournament Temple City, because there is just so much more going on with the rest of the build, from the scenery to the landscape to pretty much everything other than the temple itself. Underneath the temple, for instance, there is this really nicely detailed cave network, and I really appreciate just the amount of detail they managed to pack in with the different colors of rockwork. There's bits of sand green sprinkled in for moss, there's a campfire underneath, a bit of a statue, and who knows if this is going to be relevant for the show, but there are a lot of really interesting details just tucked away here. There's a mysterious statue, there is a shrine that looks like it's to Cole's Titan dragon mech, so I have no idea what that's supposed to be alluding to in the story, but it is cool to see just so much detail packed into the inside of the cave itself. Typically, when we get an underground area like this for a Ninjago set or a large-scale LEGO playset, it tends to be one of the areas of the set that doesn't really get a lot of love, but this is kind of the opposite, where there's even more detail factored in here than arguably the rest of the temple itself, and the building actually looks pretty good completely from the backside as well. But moving past that, towards the left side of the set, there is one extra building included, which unfortunately is completely empty, so I do not know what the context of this building is. It does have some pretty nice building techniques, but there is literally nothing inside of it. There are no shelves, there's no seating, no nothing. Very, very strange, and kind of feels like it's missing something. I mean, you can open up the roof and remove it, but there's literally nothing to do inside of the building, so that's a little bit strange. It's not that big of a deal, but it's just something I did want to point out. Otherwise though, the exterior architecture of this building is quite nice. Moving back to the front of the set, there are a couple of hidden play features, such as these collapsing rocks here. Pressing down on one of these smaller shrine builds on the top of the structure triggers a chain reaction that will cause the rocks to fall down, and even on the side of the build, pushing a small button on the back will cause some rocks to split open, revealing a hidden weapon on the inside of the rock piece. Unfortunately, this hidden weapon is not that interesting. It is literally just a golden machete, so I feel like they could have done something a bit more interesting there, but it is nice to still just have an extra play feature, and shows that even a beautiful display piece like this can still have a lot of fun for kids to play around and discover interesting things throughout the set. Speaking of this entire area, I also really love the way the tree build is done. Utilizing wedges and angles and curves and ratchet joints just look really good, and then you have this really nice shrine-like area with the mixel joints being used to form this archway, which is another really, really nice touch. Moving onwards from there, there is one last sort of play feature. A boulder is included that is intended to be rolled down this bridge, but honestly it's a little hit or miss. Sometimes it gets stuck or sometimes just falls off the bridge entirely, but the bridge itself is really nice, and I just love how it is at a very steep angle, showcasing how pretty much the entire play of this build is all just hovering above the ground with a cave structure underneath, which hints at there being a lot more to go in this particular structure in terms of different levels and geometries and so on. Of course, your entry point to the set is this small docks area. There is a really nice small build for a crane and a nice archway to introduce you to the set itself. But beyond that, there isn't that much else to talk about for this build. Essentially, what you see is what you get. Now this is the kind of build that really reminds me of some of the really great Ninjago sets of the past. Stuff like the Temple of Verjitsu, which I already mentioned, is clearly the blueprint here when it comes to making a beautiful, solid temple with some associated scenery and buildings around it, but I feel like this just absolutely surpasses its predecessor. Despite some similar techniques being used in the building structure and the way that the temple is built and the side buildings, this is just a lot better in every single way, and a lot of that is because of the fact that it is a lot more than a temple. It actually harkens back to a lot of the building techniques that we've seen in LEGO Monkey Kid sets, and while it isn't quite on the scale of the Ninjago City sets, which are much, much larger and meant to be compatible with modular buildings, this does feel like LEGO learned from a lot of the great sets they did for Monkey Kid, like these underwater temples and the beautiful Flower Fruit Mountain. It just really feels like a full package all come together. And speaking of a full package, you can actually combine it with the smaller tournament battle arena by removing these two 2x2 curved plates here and revealing these 1x2 bricks with Technic holes attached, allowing you to connect it up with Technic pins. Altogether, the Tournament Temple City is absolutely a phenomenal flagship set for Ninjago, and honestly, I don't think we've ever gotten a building this ornate and this detailed other than Ninjago City for the entire Ninjago line. This feels like a type of playset we would get for LEGO Monkey Kid, which I have said consistently has some of the best LEGO sets ever, from vehicles to mechs, and especially with playsets, this is really up there and definitely is one of the strongest builds we've ever gotten for a Ninjago set. Is it completely revolutionary like the Source Dragon of Motion or Cole's Titan Dragon Mech, which basically redefine how things should be built in their entire class of building? Not necessarily, but this is still just a beautiful building. It certainly is one of the best we've ever gotten from Ninjago, and for $250, you get 3,489 pieces. So the value here is absolutely insane, and definitely helps offset some of the more overpriced and expensive sets of the wave. Again, for $250, I cannot recommend this enough. This is easily one of my favorite Ninjago sets, maybe ever, and I would strongly recommend you check this one out when it releases on June 1st, 2024, because they absolutely killed it with this one, and if this is any indicator of future Ninjago playsets, I certainly am very excited to see what the future holds. That's all for this review. Of course, do let me know in the comments what you think of this build. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And how do you think it stacks up compared to some of the other LEGO Asian-inspired, Oriental-inspired playsets? That's all for this one, and I hope you enjoyed. So that sums up our coverage of the brand new Tournament Temple City, a really interesting flagship set for the Ninjago Summer Wave. I just love the amount of detail here, from the molded dragon head from the gimmick sets on the top to the inclusion of this very nice dark orange dragon in a color we haven't really seen before, to the fact that you can connect it over to the other sets. This is a really nice build and really does feel like if LEGO were to design the Temple of Erjitsu today, that's kind of what it would look like. That about sums up our review of the Tournament Temple City. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of this incredible large Ninjago set? I hope you enjoyed our review, and definitely stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.